$25 million. That's all it took. While American ports are buried in committee meetings and feasibility studies, Canada just built North America's first hydrogen refueling port, and they did it in 3 weeks. I'm not talking about plans. I'm not talking about proposals. I'm talking about construction that already started. Hydrogen production facility, electric rail locomotive, alternative fuel vessel refueling, all of it operational before New York, Boston, or Virginia even finished their environmental impact assessments. This isn't a race anymore. It's over. Here's what nobody's talking about. European shipping companies face mandatory carbon reporting in 2026. Not voluntary, not optional, mandatory. They need ports with hydrogen refueling capabilities. Halifax is building it right now. American ports, they're scheduling committee meetings to discuss maybe considering possibly studying the potential feasibility of perhaps planning something eventually. By the time United States ports break ground on hydrogen infrastructure, Halifax will have captured every major European shipping line routing cargo through the Hamburg-Halifax Green Corridor. Permanent market share loss, permanent job losses at American ports. All because Canada invested $25 million while America debated. But here's where it gets complicated. The timing isn't accidental. Transport Minister Anita Anand announced this investment on February 5th, just 3 weeks ago. The investment positions Halifax as North America's only carbon-neutral shipping gateway exactly when European Union emissions regulations make carbon-neutral shipping mandatory. Perfect timing, strategic execution, complete American failure to compete. Let me show you what's actually being built. The Halifax-Hamburg Green Shipping Corridor creates a direct zero-emission trade route between Canada and Germany. Ships running on hydrogen, ammonia, or other alternative fuels can now refuel in Halifax, making transatlantic green shipping commercially viable for the first time. This isn't theoretical. The $22.5 million investment funds immediate construction. Hydrogen production facility at the port to generate fuel locally using Nova Scotia hydroelectric power. Electric rail infrastructure to receive and store alternative fuels for ships. Bunkering equipment to refuel vessels quickly without delaying port operations. Now, what I'm about to show you changes the whole picture. Hamburg is Europe's second largest container port and Germany's primary gateway for North American trade. German manufacturing exports, automotive parts, machinery, chemicals, all flowing through Hamburg to North America. And increasingly, those shipments must meet strict carbon reporting requirements under European Union regulations taking effect in 2026. Companies shipping between Hamburg and North America face a choice. Route through United States ports using conventional diesel-powered vessels and pay carbon penalties, or route through Halifax using hydrogen-powered ships and claim carbon neutrality. The cost difference grows every year as European emissions regulations tighten. Halifax is betting that green shipping becomes mandatory, not optional. And they're building the infrastructure now to capture that traffic before American ports wake up. Wait, it gets worse. Here's the problem for New York, Boston, Charleston, and Virginia. Building hydrogen refueling infrastructure requires years of regulatory approvals, environmental assessments, safety certifications, local government coordination. United States maritime regulations weren't written for alternative fuel vessels. The Port of New York and New Jersey handles 9.4 million containers annually, making it the busiest East Coast port. But it has no hydrogen infrastructure, no alternative fuel refueling, no immediate plans to build either. The Port Authority discusses green initiatives in press releases, but hasn't committed funding or construction timelines. Same story at Virginia, Savannah, Charleston. Lots of environmental sustainability talk, zero actual hydrogen refueling infrastructure under construction. Halifax isn't constrained by American bureaucratic delays. Canadian maritime regulations already accommodate alternative fuels. Nova Scotia's provincial government supports the project. The Port Authority has direct control over terminal development. No competing jurisdictions blocking construction. Result, Halifax operational hydrogen refueling by late 2026 or early 2027. American ports still discussing feasibility studies. This creates a permanent first-mover advantage. Shipping companies establishing Hamburg-Halifax green corridors will route cargo through Halifax for years, even if United States ports eventually build comparable infrastructure. Supply chain relationships and logistics networks don't change easily once established. This is the part that kept me up last night. The $25 million investment isn't just about ships. It includes an electric rail locomotive and incentive programs to shift freight from trucks to rail. This solves a major competitive weakness for Halifax. The port sits at the eastern edge of Canada, far from major population centers. Toronto is 1,500 kilometers away. Chicago is 2,000 kilometers. Cargo arriving in Halifax needs efficient rail connections to reach customers in central Canada and the American Midwest. Canadian National Railway connects Halifax to the entire North American rail network. The port's investment in electric locomotives and rail incentives makes that connection carbon neutral, allowing shippers to claim zero-emission delivery from Hamburg to Chicago via Halifax. Compare this to United States East Coast ports. New York and Virginia have excellent rail connections, but those connections run on diesel locomotives, Charleston and Savannah. Same situation, no electric rail infrastructure connecting ports to inland distribution centers. For European companies shipping to North American customers, the math is straightforward. Route through Halifax with electric rail to Chicago and claim carbon neutral delivery, or route through New York with diesel rail to Chicago and face carbon reporting penalties. But that's not even the real story. The cost advantage isn't huge today, but it grows every year as carbon taxes increase and corporate emissions reporting becomes mandatory. Halifax is positioning for that future, while American ports remain stuck in diesel-dependent infrastructure. And then this happened. The Halifax investment isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a comprehensive strategy to capture global trade flows that currently depend on United States infrastructure. There's the Trans Mountain Pipeline redirecting oil exports to Asia through Vancouver instead of American Gulf Coast refineries. Quebec building electricity transmission capacity to Europe. Arctic shipping routes being developed to bypass traditional North American gateways entirely. Halifax becomes the Atlantic component of this strategy. European cargo entering North America through a Canadian port using zero-emission shipping and rail, eliminating dependence on American infrastructure and avoiding Trump's arbitrary tariffs. Here's what nobody's talking about. Canadian ports handled approximately 40 million containers in 2024 across Vancouver, Montreal, Halifax, and smaller terminals. United States East Coast ports handled roughly 40 million containers just through New York, Virginia, and Savannah alone. The volumes aren't comparable, but the growth trajectory favors Canada. Vancouver container traffic increased 30% over the past 5 years as Asian shippers avoid United States West Coast congestion and labor disputes. Halifax can achieve similar growth by capturing European traffic concerned about American political instability. The green shipping infrastructure accelerates this shift. Every European company facing emissions reporting requirements has incentive to route through Halifax instead of New York. Every shipper worried about Trump's tariff threats has incentive to avoid American ports entirely. Canada is building the infrastructure to make that possible and doing it now. Now, what I'm about to show you changes everything. Trump's tariff threats and trade chaos gave Canada the perfect opening to position Halifax as the stable alternative to American port dependencies. European shipping companies watched Trump impose tariffs on Canadian goods, threaten to annex Canada economically, and create rolling uncertainty about North American trade relationships. Those companies need reliable supply chains that won't be disrupted by presidential tweets. Halifax offers that reliability, Canadian government stability, predictable regulatory environment, no arbitrary tariff threats changing every few months, and now green shipping infrastructure that aligns with European environmental mandates. German manufacturers shipping through Hamburg to North American customers don't care about United States domestic politics. They care about cost, reliability, and emissions compliance. Halifax delivers all three better than American alternatives. The hydrogen infrastructure gives Halifax the competitive edge, but Trump's chaos makes the business case compelling. Why route through New York and deal with potential tariff disruptions when Halifax offers carbon-neutral shipping through a politically stable country? But here's where it gets complicated. Canadian port authorities understand this dynamic. They're investing aggressively in infrastructure improvements. While American ports face budget constraints and political gridlock, the gap widens every year. United States East Coast ports have structural disadvantages they cannot overcome quickly. First, regulatory complexity. American maritime regulations require extensive federal, state, and local approvals for new port infrastructure. Environmental impact assessments take years. Safety certifications for alternative fuel handling require federal agencies that move slowly. Halifax built hydrogen infrastructure with $25 million and 2-year construction timeline because Canadian regulations allow it. American ports would spend 5 years on approvals before breaking ground. Second, political fragmentation. Port of New York and New Jersey involves 2 states, dozens of municipalities, federal agencies, and competing port authorities. Getting agreement on infrastructure investments requires political consensus that rarely happens. Halifax Port Authority makes decisions independently. Nova Scotia supports the project. Federal funding approved, construction starts immediately, no political gridlock delays. Third, competing priorities. American ports face immediate pressures: aging infrastructure, labor disputes, congestion management, security requirements. Green shipping infrastructure gets discussed but never prioritized. Halifax can prioritize green infrastructure because Canadian maritime industry is smaller and more flexible. Result: Halifax operational green shipping infrastructure by 2027. American ports still conducting feasibility studies. Wait, it gets worse. The Hamburg-Halifax corridor isn't hypothetical. Major European shipping lines are already adjusting routes to prioritize Halifax for green vessels. Reports are coming in that one of the world's largest container shipping companies based in Hamburg has publicly discussed routing through Halifax for alternative fuel vessels. The company faces strict European Union emissions reporting requirements and needs ports capable of refueling their new hydrogen and ammonia-powered ships. Sources are now confirming that a Danish shipping giant invested heavily in green methanol vessels. Those ships need refueling infrastructure. Halifax is building it, New York is not. What we're learning is that a major French shipping company announced commitments to carbon-neutral shipping by 2050. Meeting those commitments requires ports with alternative fuel capabilities. Halifax is positioning to be that port for transatlantic routes. These aren't small players experimenting with green technology. These are the companies that move majority of container traffic between Europe and North America. Their route decisions determine which ports thrive and which decline. Halifax is winning those route decisions by building infrastructure first. And critically, those decisions become sticky. Once shipping lines establish Halifax routes, train logistics networks, and coordinate with inland transportation, they don't easily switch back to American ports. Even if the United States eventually builds comparable infrastructure, the Halifax investment creates strategic vulnerability for United States East Coast port employment. Here's what nobody's talking about. Ports are major economic engines. Port of New York and New Jersey supports hundreds of thousands of jobs. Virginia, Savannah, and Charleston, similar economic impact. If European shipping traffic shifts from American ports to Halifax, those jobs disappear gradually as shipping lines adjust routes and cargo flows change. Canadian ports employ fewer workers per container than American ports due to higher automation. Halifax investment includes automated equipment and electric systems requiring fewer operators. Lower operating costs plus carbon-neutral operations create double competitive advantage. American port unions fought automation for decades to protect jobs. That resistance meant United States ports remained labor-intensive while Asian and European ports automated. Now Halifax is automating with green technology, but that's not even the real story. United States maritime industry faces a choice: accept automation and green infrastructure upgrades to remain competitive or protect traditional jobs and watch cargo shift to Canadian ports that invested in modern capabilities. The political will for massive port infrastructure investment doesn't exist in current American politics. Meanwhile, Canada invested $25 million in Halifax with more funding commitments planned. Now, what I'm about to show you is critical. Timing matters. European Union emissions reporting requirements become mandatory in 2026. Companies must document carbon footprint for all shipping operations and pay penalties for exceeding thresholds. Halifax hydrogen infrastructure operational by late 2026 or early 2027, exactly when European shippers need carbon-neutral routes. United States ports, even if they start planning hydrogen infrastructure today, won't have operational facilities until 2030 at earliest, given American regulatory timelines. That's a 3 to 4 year gap where Halifax captures European shipping traffic with no American competition. 3 years is enough time for shipping lines to establish permanent route changes. Logistics networks get built around Halifax. Inland rail connections optimize for Halifax arrival times. Warehouse distribution centers locate near Halifax rail terminals. Customs processes streamlined for Halifax entry. By the time American ports build hydrogen infrastructure, Halifax has 3 years of operational experience, established customer relationships, and optimized logistics. Very hard for United States ports to win that traffic back. This is permanent market share loss, not temporary. American East Coast ports will spend next decade watching European container traffic flow through Halifax while they struggle to secure funding and approvals for infrastructure that should have been built 5 years ago. And then this happened. Trump's tariff chaos accelerated the timeline by giving European shippers immediate reason to avoid American ports. Halifax capitalized by investing in infrastructure that makes the switch permanent. But here's where it gets complicated. This represents strategic failure by American maritime industry to recognize how quickly green shipping requirements would change competitive dynamics. The latest information shows that from January 1st, 2026, shipping companies must submit allowances for 100% of their verified carbon dioxide emissions for all voyages involving European Union ports. This marks the end of the phased implementation. Documents reveal that the operating cost of an average bulk vessel trading within the EU could increase by $1.3 million annually in 2026. Officials are now saying that shipping companies reported 89.8 million tons of verified carbon dioxide emissions in 2024. The surrender obligation is phased in, requiring 40% coverage in 2025, 70% in 2026, and 100% from 2027 onwards. What we're learning is that from 2026, the system expands to include methane and nitrous oxide. Methane has a global warming potential 28 times higher than carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide is 228 times more potent. This means vessels using liquefied natural gas, which emit methane during extraction, transportation, and bunkering, will face higher compliance costs. The inclusion of these gases is designed to incentivize a shift toward cleaner fuels like hydrogen and ammonia. Reports are coming in that the price of EU allowances is expected to rise sharply. 2024 through 2025 saw prices between 65 and 90 euros per metric ton of carbon dioxide. According to projections, the carbon price should range between 60 and 150 euros in 2026. This creates enormous pressure on shipping companies to find carbon-neutral routes. Halifax, with hydrogen refueling infrastructure operational in 2027, offers exactly that solution at exactly the right time. American ports without hydrogen infrastructure face years of watching European cargo traffic route through Canada while their shippers pay escalating carbon penalties. Wait, it gets worse. The $25 million investment looks small, but it repositions Halifax as North America's premier green shipping gateway and locks American ports out of the fastest growing segment of transatlantic trade. That's not a subsidy. That's capturing market share while competitors remain stuck in outdated infrastructure. Here's what nobody's talking about. While Halifax moves forward with construction, American ports are still in the talking phase. The Port of New York and New Jersey discusses sustainability in committee meetings. Virginia holds conferences about green shipping. Charleston writes white papers on alternative fuels, but none of them have committed the funding, secured the approvals, or started construction on hydrogen refueling infrastructure capable of serving ocean-going vessels. Documents reveal that Port Houston secured $25 million for a hydrogen refueling station, same amount as Halifax, but that funding is for trucks, not ships, for port equipment, not vessel refueling, and construction hasn't started yet. Sources are now confirming that Los Angeles and Long Beach received federal funding for hydrogen projects. But again, those projects focus on port equipment and drayage trucks, not refueling ocean-going container ships making transatlantic voyages. What we're learning is that no American East Coast port has operational plans for ship hydrogen refueling infrastructure comparable to what Halifax is building right now. But that's not even the real story. The regulatory environment makes it nearly impossible for American ports to move quickly. Federal maritime regulations require Coast Guard approval for alternative fuel handling, Environmental Protection Agency review for air quality impacts, Department of Transportation coordination for rail infrastructure, state environmental agencies for local permits. Each agency has its own timeline, its own requirements, its own approval process. Getting all of them aligned on a single project takes years, not months. Halifax doesn't face those constraints. Canadian federal regulations already accommodate alternative fuels. Provincial support is secured. Port Authority has direct authority to proceed. Construction starts immediately. This is the part that kept me up last night. By the time American ports navigate their regulatory maze and secure funding and start construction, Halifax will have been operational for years. Those years matter. European shipping lines will have established routes through Halifax. Supply chains will have adapted. Customers will have built relationships. Logistics networks will have optimized around Halifax as the entry point for carbon-neutral cargo into North America. Now, what I'm about to show you is the long-term impact. American port employment depends on cargo volume. If European traffic shifts to Halifax, port jobs disappear. Longshoreman positions, terminal operators, truck drivers, warehouse workers, customs brokers. Reports are coming in that the Port of New York and New Jersey supports over 400,000 jobs in the region. Even a 10% loss in European container traffic means 40,000 jobs affected. Virginia, Savannah, Charleston face similar vulnerability. These aren't just statistics. These are families and communities dependent on port operations for their livelihoods. And then this happened. The shift won't be sudden. It'll be gradual. One shipping line at a time, deciding that Halifax offers better carbon compliance. One cargo route at a time, switching from New York to Halifax to avoid emissions penalties. But over 5 to 10 years, the cumulative effect becomes permanent restructuring of North American trade flows. European cargo increasingly entering through Halifax rather than American ports. Here's what nobody's talking about. American political dysfunction makes strategic infrastructure investment nearly impossible. Congress can't agree on port funding. State and federal agencies compete for jurisdiction. Environmental groups and business interests battle over every project. Canada doesn't have that problem. Federal government commits funding. Provinces support development. Port authorities execute projects. Results happen quickly. The $25 million Halifax investment demonstrates what focused government action can accomplish. While American ports debate and delay, Canada builds and captures market share. But here's where it gets complicated. This isn't just about Halifax versus American ports. This is about Canada systematically building infrastructure to reduce North American dependence on United States gateways. Vancouver capturing Asian cargo that used to flow through Los Angeles and Seattle. Montreal handling European traffic that used to route through New York. Halifax positioning to dominate transatlantic green shipping. Arctic routes being developed to bypass traditional shipping lanes entirely. Each investment part of a larger strategy to establish Canada as the preferred gateway for global trade entering North America. What we're learning is that American ports assumed their dominance was permanent. Geographic advantages, established infrastructure, proximity to major markets, all factors that traditionally made United States ports the obvious choice for international cargo. But those advantages matter less when regulatory delays prevent infrastructure upgrades, when political gridlock blocks strategic investments, when competitors move faster to meet changing market requirements. Halifax with hydrogen refueling infrastructure operational in 2027, while American ports are still conducting feasibility studies, represents exactly that dynamic. Canada moving faster, building smarter, capturing the future of green shipping while America debates. Documents reveal that the first Halifax hydrogen refueling will likely occur in late 2027. By that time, European Union emissions regulations will be fully enforced. Carbon penalties will be substantial. Green shipping corridors will be economically mandatory, not optional. Halifax will be ready. American ports won't be. That's the story nobody's covering. $25 million. 3 weeks from announcement to construction. North America's first hydrogen refueling port. Permanent competitive advantage for Halifax, permanent market share loss for American ports. All because Canada invested while America delayed. I'm curious what you think about this. Where do you see American ports in 5 years if this trend continues?